everyone, welcome back to the journey of my YouTube channel, and welcome back to my series on reading classics and my expectations for them versus the realities of reading them. This video is part 3 in the series. If you haven't watched part 1 in the series, I would recommend going and watching that and then coming back to this one, because in that first video I talk about what my goals for this series are and are not, and I think that will be helpful as setup for this video. In this one, I'm talking about Robinson Crusoe. I finally have a physical book for this one, and it's an antique book that I got pretty recently, and it has a ship on the back. And I just read this. You've seen this book before if you watched my August TBR video, so I did watch it just back in August, or read it rather, back in August. So yeah, somehow I have managed to never actually read this book before then, but I had been wanting to for quite a while. I'd just been a little bit conflicted because I had heard from some people, this is amazing, this is my favorite classic ever, it's this amazing spiritual journey, and I had heard other people be like, this is so long and so boring and so pointless, and I had also heard somebody be like, it takes him days to figure out that the footprint he sees on the island could have just been his. And I'm like, yeah, that is actually fair. When I read it, that didn't end up really bothering me very much, but yes, that is actually a fair point. And I guess just the other expectation that I had for it was that it would feel like stuffy, old world type writing, because this is so old. This is like from the 1700s, and I just kind of, like I said with Beowulf, I thought it was going to feel very distant and very different from what I was used to reading, and just kind of stiff and dry. So in reality, is it boring? Maybe slightly at times, but I really didn't find myself bored very much. It does move fairly slowly for most of it, but in general, I just found it kind of satisfying to watch this man go from having absolutely nothing to using what was in his ship and what was on his island to survive, and then going from survival to basically being the king of this island where there are no other humans living. As I mentioned in my other video where I talked about this book, it is basically like watching somebody play Minecraft, and it's slightly boring potentially for some people, but it is also kind of satisfying and interesting, and he works so hard. He sometimes will take decades on a single project, and he's really creative with what he has. There are a lot of times where he'll at first think, I can't make this, I just straight up do not have what I need, and then later he'll be like, oh, but actually I have this, and if I combine it with this, then I can make something that will work well enough to turn into a tool so that I can use this other resource, and there you go, now I have what I thought it was impossible to make. And also, this character voice is a lot more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. It's all first person. It's Robinson Crusoe writing his own account of all that happened to him. There's some pretty long accounts from his diary, so it doesn't feel nearly as distant as I thought that it was going to. It feels pretty relatable in a lot of ways, actually. It can be pretty funny. Robinson can be a sort of sassy, snarky guy at times. He can also be just so incredibly realistic sometimes. The descriptions of the nature or the food or the objects can be very vivid, and sometimes just talking about his own human nature. He's so deadly honest that I love it. One of my favorite parts of the entire book is when he's journaling about being sick, and he's like, June 21st, very ill, frightened almost to death, sick, no help. And then June 22nd, a little better but under dreadful apprehensions of sickness. June 23rd, very bad again, cold and shivering, and then a violent headache. June 24th, much better. June 25th, an ague very violent. The fit held me 7 hours, cold fit and hot with faint sweats after it. Like, I just love that the author puts in this detail of, on June 24th, he's like, much better, and then that's when it gets way worse. I'm like, yep, that is being sick right there. That is how it is in real life. And there are quite a few things like that where it's just surprisingly relatable for being so old, and for Robinson Crusoe being in this very unrelatable, I guess, situation. Like, how many of us have been alone on an island for decades? It's kind of impressive how much I felt like I could relate to what he was going through. Of course, his relationship with the people who live on the islands is a big point of debate. I was kind of impressed how much respect he had for specifically Friday. I mean, he immediately, after saving his life, makes him his servant, which was kind of like, why does he have to do all your hard work now? That's a little questionable. But he's also very much educating Friday and listening to him and learning from him. And initially, Robinson Crusoe was like so terrified of all the islanders because he thinks they are just going to come up and eat him. But then he kind of learns gradually that that's not necessarily how it works. And he definitely has some pretty prideful attitudes toward them at first, but then he gets very self-aware about that. And initially, it can be kind of uncomfortable to read him, thinking about these people as savages and thinking that he's so much more knowledgeable than they are. But then that ends up being exactly the point where he learns that he was wrong about that, and he repeatedly confesses that he was wrong about that, and he comes to learn a lot more about these people. So it's not like he's necessarily perfect toward them by the end of the book, but he is very aware of his own imperfections toward them. And Friday being with him is also very much his choice. Like, he has the option to leave and go back to his people and do what he wants. He does not have to stay with Robinson Crusoe. And spoilers, I guess, he does choose to stay with him. So I thought it's cool that Friday had as much agency and decision-making power as any other character. So what's quickly turning into a pattern with these classic books is that what surprises me most is actually the main theme that the books center around. Robinson Crusoe, I felt, was very much about contentment and finding satisfaction and gratitude wherever you are. Because at the beginning of the story, Robinson is in a shipwreck. He loses absolutely everything. He loses everyone. And his initial reaction to that, understandably enough, is to be pretty angry. And I'm sure he calls it despair several times. He's very upset about that. Obviously anybody would be. But then the longer he lives on the island, the more he comes to recognize how much he's been given, and that it's actually a huge grace just that he's alive at all and gets to see the next day, and he still has food to survive on, and he doesn't die when he gets sick, which I don't think is a spoiler because obviously he can't die, it's first person. And then as life on the island goes from bare survival to actually being pretty comfy in a lot of ways, pretty happy in a lot of ways, he just realizes more and more that he can really make the most of what has been given him instead of focusing on what he doesn't have. His life doesn't have to be miserable. He can choose to do his best where he is and actually make life pretty great for himself, even if it's not what he thought that it was going to be. And I didn't realize that that was kind of the point of this, but that was definitely how I interpreted the main point of this, and I thought that was a pretty cool lesson that was definitely worth reading this book to see laid out in that way. Okay, those were my expectations versus realities for Robinson Crusoe, and that concludes my first triad of videos in this series. So let me know if you want me to make more of these videos on classics. Let me know what classics you would like to hear about. Let me know your expectations versus realities for classic books. I would love to hear from you about that. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you like these videos. I have been forgetting to ask you to do that, so please don't be as forgetful as I have been. And if you want to see more of these videos, if you want me to keep making these videos, please let me know that by joining the team. I will see you guys next time. Thanks for journeying with me. Bye!